C#, you know. The reason I said that the if condition and switch case between the C# and Java are similar, because there are some minor differences that you will notice, especially with switch case. As far as the loops are concerned, they're like exactly the same. There isn't anything different between the two. So you'll find a lot of similarities between learning Java and C# today. However, at the same time, when we are done completing the programming constructs, then we will go back and connect these concepts with the object-oriented classes that we have learned in the last few weeks. So that will be the main focus for today, being able to connect those concepts with the object-oriented programming concepts. Okay, so let me share my screen with you guys. And under unit number 4, we have the PowerPoints for chapters 3 and 4. So I'm starting with the chapter 3 PowerPoint, sorry, chapter 5 PowerPoint, my bad, chapter 5 and chapter 6, okay. Now, let me ask you guys a few questions about decision making. Are you all okay with the concepts of decision making? Do you all understand an if condition and switch case? Okay. So why do we have else ifs? What's the whole point of having else ifs?
Else if is basically if the statement 1 is false, that means statement 2 is true.
And under what circumstances you would have else ifs?
If you are having like multiple, like if you had like int age equals 18 and then else if age is like over 75, kind of like that.
Give me a little bit more concrete explanation.
I'm sorry, it's
Anybody else would like to give it a try? Why would you need an else if?
When I write code, I use them for if a statement is true, then process this, else send an exception report. Usually what I write them for.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else would like to give it a try? The answer is simpler, very simple answer. When you are testing for more than 2 conditions, you use else ifs. That's it. Because for 2 conditions, you have if and else, right? So what would be the most simplest way of saying that else ifs are needed when you are testing for?
If you have more than 2 decisions.
More than 2, exactly. That's it. Simple as that. So what is a nested if?
An if that's inside an if statement.
If inside an if. Cool. What is the advantage of having a nested if?
More in-depth check.
Okay. So when you have in-depth decisions to make, or in other words, if you have several decisions that have a common decision at the top. So you make the common decision and then you look for individual decisions. For example, when filing for taxes, the first common decision would be what tax bracket you fall under. And then based on that, the next if conditions are dependent on that. So that's one way of looking at a nested if, where internal ifs have a common if. The common if is outer and the uncommon ones are inner. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Now, when you write an if condition, and if the if condition itself requires multiple conditions, how do you put multiple conditions together? If your if condition is so complicated that it requires multiple conditions, how do you put them all conditions together?
Is it the or operator?
Yeah, Ismail also mentioned that, and JC also mentioned that. It's or, and we also have and, okay? What's the difference between the two?
With and it's both conditions have to be true, and or is just one of them has to be at least true.
Okay, cool. Do you guys know what is an enhanced or condition?
No.
Enhanced or is actually a built-in stuff. It's not apparent. It's not a separate operator. In the good old days, the compilers were not very proficient. So what they used to do for or, they would check the right-hand side and they would check the left-hand side. They will check both sides. It doesn't matter if the first one is true or not. It will still check the second one and will then or the two together. But the enhanced or checks the first condition. If first condition is true, it doesn't even bother checking the second condition because it's worthless. It's a waste of time. It doesn't matter if the second condition is true or false, the statement will be true because one of the conditions has to be true for an or. So not all languages, but some languages, compilers behind the scene act upon enhanced or operators. We have one more conditional, we have one more logical operator besides and or. Generally, it is used to negate a condition. It's a not operator. It looks like an exclamation mark. Exactly. So if the condition is true, we're going to make it false. If it is false, we're going to make it just true. So that's for negating or changing the condition. Okay. If in the same statement, I have and operator as well as or operator, so I probably have to have three conditions, right? Condition 1 and condition 2 or condition 3. So which two conditions will be judged first? The conditions with and or the conditions with or? It is condition 1 and condition 2 or condition 3. Which two conditions will be judged first? So Ismail, you're saying conditions 2 and 3? Is that what you meant by your answer? Okay. I'm not saying Ismail is wrong, but I'm not saying he's right either.
I
So
always thought it was like not, then and, then or.
yeah,
Do you use any in Java?
no,
Okay, so it's just my scimitar. Okay.
yeah, we don't. So which two conditions will be judged first? 1, 2 or 2, 3?
Which ones were 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 again?
Condition 1 and condition 2 or condition 3. Which two conditions will be judged first?
The first and the third.
First and the third. Now, since you guys are looking at my screen, I'm going to just write it out here. I think be better for everybody to be able to see it that way. Okay. So I got a condition 1 and I got a condition 2, or I got a condition 3. Okay. So the option yet that you picked was not even on the table. I said, will this be done first or will this be done first? You said this and this. How is that possible to just have the two ends done first? You know, I mean, like,
Well, I was thinking that like if the first condition isn't true, it wouldn't bother wasting its time with the second one. So then it would check the third condition second.
if it is enhanced and, only in that case. If it is not enhanced and, no, I'm not going to do that. So the bottom line is and is a higher precedence operator than or. So it will first make sure what is the outcome of these two. Only then it will check the outcome of this or the outcome of that. So or is a lower precedence operator than and. So if you want or to be done first, then you got to make sure that or operation is in parentheses. Only then or will get a precedence over and. Okay. Now, if you flip things around, if you make this or, and if you make this and, then of course, you have changed the whole scenario. And since there are no parentheses, now 2 and 3 will be judged first, and their solution will be ORed with condition 1. So and will always take precedence over or. So in any case, you have or and and together, and you want or to take precedence, you got to make sure that or is in parentheses. Okay. What is the purpose of writing curly braces?
To
Normally
list the
it's-
arguments or parameters.
That's parentheses.
Yeah. Curly braces, aren't they the start and end of a code block?
Yeah, okay. So if you're writing an if condition or you're writing any of the loops, you will use the curly braces to mark the beginning and the end of the block, if condition block or loop block or switch case block. However, in loops and if condition, under one circumstances, using curly braces becomes optional. And what is that circumstance?
When there's just one line of code in the if statement.
Exactly. Okay. Or that there's only one line of code associated with an if condition, then it becomes absolutely. Yeah. So here on slide number 6, what you see on the left-hand side is simply a flow of information going in one direction. That's linear or sequential code. On the other hand, you see a decision making, which is shown in flowchart with the help of a diamond. So if it's false, it goes one route, which is coded as else. If it is true, it goes the other route, which is basically coded as your main condition. So the outcome of your condition is always a Boolean value, a true or a false. So here, in this particular case, let me zoom in a little bit more. Okay. So if the value of quiz score is equals to 10, why are we using 2 equals? Why are we not using 1 equals?
Because 1 equal is an assignment operator.
Yep. And 2 equals is a comparison operator. Okay. So if quiz score is equals to 10, means you're checking to see if they are equivalent, then you will say the score is perfect. Now, since there's only one statement with the if condition, writing the curly braces becomes optional. There is no else with this one. So that's why if you look at the flow chart, false really doesn't has anything in it. Then you have an if else, which require, like if followed by another condition. And the else basically runs wherever if fails. Okay, let's see. Okay, we're talking about logical operators, the and the or. And operator and the or operator are written like this, that the and is written with 2 ampersands, which is exactly like you would write it in C#, and or is written with 2 pipes, as you are used to of writing it in C#. Okay. So here is the or, and the previous slide had the and operator. Now, also, let's have a look at the switch. What's wrong with the switch case? It looks very similar to how you would write a switch case in C#, but there's something wrong.
There's no break.
There are no
Statement.
break. Exactly. So when there is no break, all of them will run. So you need to put a break statement between each case. That's the last statement in the case. So if I were to put break next to each case, will that be enough? Or do I also need to put a break next to default? If this was C#, then you'll be like, yeah, you need to have a break with the default. But in Java, default doesn't need a break. It is anyway the last instruction, so it will just terminate. Okay, so before these are some of the main topics in this chapter. So I will be stopping to share the screen for a minute. I'll load my Eclipse. You can also load Eclipse on your computers, and then then we'll start working on with some examples. Okay. Okay, so give me a green check when you guys are ready. In the meanwhile, other people are getting ready. Let me complete the attendance sheet for those who join late. Aiden is here. And Zachary, Claude is not, right? No. Okay, no Zachary. No Carter. Okay. And we have Ethan. Okay. So we are missing 3 people. Just so that you guys know, the book error has now been resolved. So the book is accessible. Okay. I think Jack Harris is the only one left. Okay.
Sorry, I used the wrong emote and it went away.
Okay. Sure. So here I am creating a project for today. I'm calling my project Unit 4. And please make sure that you uncheck the Create Module Info checkbox. And then hit Finish. So we will create a new class called If Condition Demo 1. I'm just waiting for everybody on line 7 because I want to teach you guys something new that I did not teach you guys before. I had to learn this because Desmond was telling me, man, you type so slow. You have slowed me down. I'm like, okay, Desmond, I will try to, code faster. No, Desmond is not even saying anything.
Can't respond to that, man.
Yeah, I've been working hard to get a little bit faster in coding. Usually when you have to throw an output to the screen, what do you type?
System.out.print.
Okay.
ln.
Okay. Now there's a Eclipse shortcut which will write all of that for you. So all you need to do is on the on whichever line you want that, you type sys out and you hit control space bar. So I'm going to write it in the comment. Type sys out, all lowercase. Then press control and space bar. Everybody get to test that? And then run it. And you will see the output that num1 is less than num2. If I change number 1 to 1000 and rerun the program, now there is no output. Of course, there will be no output now because num1 is not less than number 2, and I have not given any alternate. So here I give an alternate. I'm saying, okay, else num1 is greater than num2, and I run it, and now I get an alternate. However, that alternate is not a perfect solution. The reason is because if num1 and num2 are exactly the same, it will still say that num1 is greater than num2, because since num1 is not less than num2, it will assume that else is true for all other possible conditions. Therefore, this would be a good example for me to have an else if as an intermediate condition where I'll say, okay, check to see if number 1 is maybe greater than number 2. And the last alternate for me would be to say that, yeah, you know what, num1 is equal to num2. How many of you are taking classes with Wendy this semester?
I am.
Is it in person or is it on Zoom?
I don't know if she has any in person, but I do mine on Zoom.
Okay.
She has in person, but she allows us to do Zoom.
Okay. You know, I want you to try something next time. When you have class with her next time?
Monday.
Oh, you had it yesterday. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. You know, next time, you know, I mean, like you try this on with her and say, you know, Wendy, oh my God, Saad types so slow. We have to tell him to type faster. And see what she says. He actually was my student many years ago. And she probably will tell you some stories that they wouldn't tell me. You know, there were two twins in that class, or two brothers, I don't remember if they were twins or not. And they were like so busy all the time that they would always be falling behind because they were doing other things while coding. And this was like 8-hour-long class, 5 days a week for 2 years. It's not like traditional classroom that you guys are in right now. So 8 hours a week, that's 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 2 years. And one day, I think it was maybe their third semester or so, and I got mad. I get like aggravated with their habits. And I was like, they were like, can you slow down? I'm like, no, I'm not slowing down. You become a little bit faster, because I knew that they had, they were distracted. They were young kids. They would be distracted and would be doing other things while coding. So that's why they were falling behind. So anyway, so they quoted that all the time till they graduated, that one day we asked Saad to slow down. He said, no, I'm not slowing down.
Why were the hours 8 hours a day for 5 days a week?
It
Was
was
it
a
just like,
it was a special grant program. So the students were actually interviewed to be in that program.
oh wow.
Yeah, you had to qualify. The grant had some specifications. You had to qualify on those specifications to be permitted into that program. So they would actually be in that program like a job, the 40 hours a week. So that's why the program was a little different in nature. And it was not easy teaching in that program because, it was in Burlington. You would teach them 8 hours, and then you would teach, I would come and teach my night classes for 4 hours. So they would get done at 4:30 in Burlington. I'll drive to Kenosha. And back in those days, we would have all in-person classes. There was no concept of Zoom, right? It was like 2015 I'm talking about. So then you'll drive to Kenosha and then teach my evening classes. So it was like different.
When did you have time for your family, man?
Sounds like my schedule right now.
Yeah, it was tough. Like the good thing was that during the daytime we were co-teaching. So it would be a split between, for example, if I'm co-teaching with Alan, it'll be a split between me and Alan. If I'm co-teaching with Ty, it'll be a split between me and Ty. So yeah. So it worked out okay. It worked out okay. Hi, Zach. I'm glad you could join. Let me update the attendance sheet. We are working with an if condition problem. Oh, to answer Smile's question, Smile, I type slow. Never noticed? Yeah, you're being kind. Okay, so in this example, you see all 3 conditions were tested. What I would like you guys to do is change this example around so that you accept an input from user, but using J option pane. So let me write in the comment, accept values of num1 and num2 from user using J option pane method, show input dialog. So do not use scanner. So 3 people are done so far. Adding, accepting values from user using J option pane. Okay, 1, 2, 5 people are done. Okay. 6, 7, 8. 9. Cool. So for those of you who are done, did you use 2 separate declarations, or did you do it in the same declaration, or did you write some more lines of code?
I did 2 separates, one for integer number 1 and one for integer number 2.
Okay. Okay. So basically, what you're doing is in place of 150, you are using J option pane dot show. Oops. Input dialog. Enter value for num1. But again, input dialog will return a string value.
Integer.parseInt.
Exactly. Integer.parseInt. And then we can simply replicate that for the second one and change this to a num2, just like that. So when I run this, it'll start giving me these kind of dialog boxes. I enter a value for num1 and I enter a value of num2, and here I get the output. Okay, so you do not need 2 separate instructions, Alvin. You could have just made this modification in the existing one and it would still work fine.
Ah, good to know.
Have we used the J option pane before?
Yep, chapter 1, first week.
Okay.
That's where I had to dig it out from. Way back in chapter 1.
Okay, so when you guys are done with this example, can you give me a green check so that I can move on to our next variation of this example? So one person still coding. Tatiana is still coding. Okay. Okay, got it. Now I would like you guys to click the file menu and hit save as. And change it to if condition demo 2. So replace the number 1 with the number 2 and hit OK. After that, hover over the class name and choose rename, and it will automatically replace the 1 with the 2. Now pay attention to the comment. I want you to accept the values of num1 and num2 from user using the scanner object methods. Okay. So now make necessary changes to this code. Okay, so 3 people are done so far. Okay. So you're simply changing how you are accepting the input from user from J option pane to scanner. So first of all, we will declare some kind of a scanner object, as we have learned before. And that's basically how you guys have been doing it. To create a scanner object, and scanner object comes from a different package, so you have to organize your imports. Now, let me delete this. I know it will gonna error out for now. Okay, just like that. Notice that when I made that deletion, it will be an error. So if I just for temporarily purpose, just put a 0 there, okay? So I still have the error on line number 7. Now, let me teach you how you can get rid of the packages that you do not need and automatically also insert the packages that you need in one go. And the best way to do that would be to one way, click the source menu and choose the option Organize Imports, or you can choose the keyboard shortcut of Control-Shift-O, which is right next to Organize Imports. Try that. Either of the two approaches, whatever you feel comfortable with. I prefer the keyboards over mouse, so I always use a shortcut. So when you use Control-Shift-O, notice the other import automatically gets deleted because it's not getting used anymore, and it's replaced with the scanner input. Okay. Now, input dot next int. Now this is where you'll be like, well, you know what? Input dot next int. I do need some kind of a message to tell the user that what the user is about to input. So yeah, that's basically something for which you would have to have two separate instructions in this approach, as each one will have its own input. Okay. So I believe three of you are still working on it. There's one new instruction I'm teaching you that is on line number 21. In the absence of this instruction, you will see that there will be a warning next to the input. It basically tells you that the input is never closed. What exactly is an input? It's a stream that you're opening into your program. So once you are done with the stream, you do not need it anymore. You should close it. Wherever you want, wherever you are done, you should close it. So for example, after I close it, my program continues to work exactly the same way. So since I do not need the stream to be open after line number 11, I can just close it right there, line 12. So this is closing the stream or input stream. And that's considered to be, first of all, you're releasing the resource. Second of all, it's a good security measure to release resources that are not in use.
Yeah, because I think it like said something about something leaking too.
Okay, now let's save this example as demo 3 and hover over the name and change the name to demo 3. If I ask you guys, what is input? How will you explain input? What is input on line 7? What is the purpose of it? What is it? What is it? What is it type? What will going to be used for?
You're accepting value from the user.
Not yet. That's what I'm saying. Only explain line 7 to me.
Input is an object on line 7, right?
Yeah. So, okay, I need more words.
It's like an input string.
No, you're deviating.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, take it from however far Ethan brought it, but I need some more words going back to what you learned last week. I need some keywords.
We're calling the system class to
They're
create scanner.
still missing the keywords that you learned last week. Let's see if anybody
We're
can.
calling the attribute scanner of the object input.
No. No. We are instantiating an object called input of type scanner. Okay. What are we doing? Instantiating. When you use the word instantiating, that word itself is equivalent to all of this. Instantiating means allocating memory for the object and turning the object from a null pointer to a memory allocated object and fill it up with some initial values to start with. All of that is inside that word instantiating. So anytime you see an object with the right-hand side filled in declaration, you will always say what? Instantiation or instantiate or instantiating, however you want to use it in the sentence. So the word instantiate is used for objects. The word initialize is used for variables. You do not say I initialized an object, because object is multi-valued. It's not a single value. So when you instantiate an object, all the properties that are represented by the object, they get initialized. Okay, does that answer your question, Jack? So whenever we declare an object, if you say I am declaring an object, it means this. This is called declaration. This is called declaring an object. Here's the difference. When you declare an object, you have created a null pointer in memory of type scanner. Means input 2 has not yet allocated any memory. It is waiting to be allocating a memory. It's pretty much a candidate for memory. But line number 9, input, is a full-fledged object which also has allocated memory. So when you use the word declare an object versus instantiate an object, they mean totally different things. Okay? Anybody has any question about this? So anytime we declare an object, it's a null pointer. Anytime we instantiate an object, it is a memory allocated object. It's not a null pointer anymore. Now, another concept I want to talk about here is object instantiation is of two types. Okay, object instantiation is of two types. Number one, named object instantiation. And the second one is an unnamed object instantiation. Can you declare an unnamed variable?
Not that I've run across.
You can't. It will never
Yeah.
let you. It needs a name for it to allocate a memory. So since you cannot create an unnamed variable, you use what we call a literal value, like 25. In double quote Sam, some kind of a value. That's a literal value. That's what basically an unnamed variable is. But with objects, you can create an unnamed object in some circumstances. For example, if object is only needed on one line and will not be needed past that one line, there is no point of instantiating it, using it on one line, and then waiting for the garbage collector of Java to come and get rid of it. That's a wastage of memory. So in that case, you will create an unnamed object. For example, what is the purpose of input? To accept an input from user of different types. And it is used in multiple lines. So it allocates memory on line 9, and it keeps allocating memory to line 18. So to some people, it would make sense to have an input allocating memory for X number of lines. However, if you only had one input, you only had to accept the input only once from the user, and that's all, then in that particular case, you wouldn't want to allocate a memory for 4 lines. So an unnamed object can be created like this. So let me give you an example. Scanner input equals to new scanner system.in. That's a named instance. An unnamed instance would be, that's it. You only write the right-hand side. You do not write the left-hand side of equals to. So you, on the fly, create an object, and that object will cease to exist on the next line. Now you'll be like, why in the world would I do that? For example, if you're writing a program in which you have a value returning function, and that value returning function's job is to return an object of a certain type. Instead of you first creating an object and then putting it in the return instruction, you can simply write return new object. So the object will be produced on the fly and will be returned to the caller, and that's it. You do not need garbage collector to come after and clean stuff. It's done. It gets generated and it gets destroyed right away. Another place where you may use an unnamed instance would be, I'll show you here, in place of input, I could technically write new scanner system.in. Okay, notice this is giving me a warning, okay, of is never closed kind of a stuff, but it's not, it will work just fine. Okay, so if I grab the same logic and put in place of input on line number 18, so notice I replace that named input instance with on the fly scanner object. And now let me run my program. Works exactly the same way, no difference. Everybody get to test this? Okay. So does anybody has any question about this approach? You probably, it's possible that it's taking a little bit of a time for you to sink in this approach, but this is something that you will see getting done in Java. Okay, everybody's good. Okay, then let's move on to creating our new class, which we will call demo switch case. with a public static void main. This is demo switch case 1 with a public static void main. Integer code, or rather, let me do this. So we have given them two sets here. Either they can enter a value between 1 through 3, or they can enter a value 4 through 6 as different codes. So now we will be accepting the code from them. Switch code. If case is 1 or case is 2 or case is 3, enter building 1. Floor 5, room 567. Break. So here, all of these cases will work like ORs. Now, if the case is 4, 5, or 6, then enter building 3, floor 2, room 200. And default means if they've entered any other code, then they will be redirected to building 1, floor 2, room 205. So that's basically the program's working as right now. So when you run this, based on the entered numbers, if I enter 5, it'll tell me building 3, room 2, room 200. If I run it again, then if I enter, let's say 1, it tells me building 1, floor 5, room 567. If I run it again and enter a value of 100, then it just sends me to the default case. So if code is 1 or 2 or 3, that's one condition. The other one is if code is 4 or 5 or 6, that's another condition. And finally, there's a default. Everybody got this? Any questions about this one? Okay, we have Desmond and Lewis still working on this, and Aiden. Okay. Now I would like you to save this as demo switch case number 2 and hover over and change it to demo switch case 2. What I want to introduce next to you is something that was added to Java in the last 4 years or so, which is a variation of switch case, which was not available in the earlier versions of Java, which will help you write less code, and your switch case will be a little bit more efficient, in terms of writing less code. Okay. So what you do is, instead of having to repeat the case so many times, you only write your case once. And you list all the values in the same case separated by comma like this. Case 1, comma 2, comma 3. You do not need the case number 2 or 3. Okay. What else you do different here is that you replace the colon with the arrow operator. Okay, you replace the colon with an arrow operator, and you write whatever instructions this case is supposed to run. You write those instructions in a curly brace block like that. Okay. And you do not even need a break instruction. Okay. So that's basically how it looks like. Then you can move on to case 4, comma 5, comma 6, same stuff. Arrow, curly brace, and a closing curly brace. And same with the default. Curly brace and a closed curly brace. So this arrow operator was introduced in Java 14, and we are now in Java 19. And you will see that it works exactly the same way as before. Everybody with me so far in this approach? Any questions? Let me clear your previous feedback so that you can give me a new feedback. So I'm waiting for JC and Aiden. Okay, cool. Now let's save this example as switch case example number 3. And hover over and rename to number 3. Okay. I'll be making some changes here. Enter department code to get director name. Or I should probably say maybe like VP name, vice president name. Okay. So I'll change my variable from code to DEPT code, department code. And also in the switch case, I'm going to change it to department code. Now, what I want to teach you guys next is that switch case can also act like a value returning code block. So for example, I type over here string department name equals to, and now I will use my switch case as a block. Okay. So of course, this will change a lot, right? So I'm going to just get rid of the way it is right now. So that I can rebuild it, and you can see it getting built again. If case is 1, 2, or 3, then say Dan Matthews. If case is 4, 5, or 6, return the name Sarah Ferris. Otherwise, return the name Carla Markson. Semicolon, because this is one instruction, remember? So we are basically using a switch case in the assignment operation. This is also new to Java. So if you have, probably if you learned Java before, I don't know, at least like maybe 1 or 2 of you have done Java before. What we did in the previous example and what we're doing in this example, did you do anything like this before? So hold on a second. Oh, I should department name, not department code, my bad. Department name. Here we go. I entered 5, so I got Sarah Ferris. If I enter 60, I get Carla. If I enter like 2, I get Dan. Okay. Everybody got this working? And do you guys have any question about this? No question. Okay. We will now then save this one as number 4. And we will look at one more variation that we did not look at before. Let's say Dan Matthews, who works for Department 1 through 3, okay? You also want to display what are the names of those departments that represents 1 through 3. And then you also want to return Dan. So you want to do multiple things. Okay? In order to do the multiple things, you got to create a code block. You got to start your code block and you got to end your code block like that, right? Okay. And you should first display what you want to display. For example, I want to display 1 is marketing. Oops. 2 is sales. And 3 is publishing house. All of these are represented. Oops, I should not have so many curly braces. Okay. All of these are represented by Dan Matthews. But when I have multiple instructions to go, I can't just say Dan Matthews. I would have to use another Java keyword called it's yield. Yield. So this is basically what I will display. So let me test this. Hold on a second. Why is it not? Oh, I have okay. Let me test this. Okay, so I'll enter 1. So notice it displays 1 for marketing, 2 for sales, 3 for publishing house, and the shouldn't be department name. It should be, VP name. VP name should be the okay. If it is 1, 2, or 3, it not only displays the information, but also tells me the name of the VP. And I'll do the same thing for Sarah Ferris. I'll just copy this block and I'll replace only some of the details. So I'll just put Sarah Ferris in place of Dan Matthews. And I'll be okay. 4, 5, 6. So we have IT. We got training. Support. And we have our QA. And so if I enter, let's say 5, then it displays, that information. So it's pretty neat what Java developers did in the recent years with switch case, that you can use it in the assignment operation. And if that warning is bothering you, line number 7, which is an unnamed scanner object, then you can hover over that warning and choose add suppress warning. So what this would do is it will add a suppress warnings, which is not a Java code, but rather something at the compiler level, and say, I want you to suppress the warning. Don't bother the user. It's okay. Don't worry about this resource.
It's not going to explode as far as we know.
Yeah, it's just, it's just hushing. Is everybody okay with this? Okay, so Jack is still working. Okay. Now I want you to open the demo switch case number 1, this one. And save this as if condition demo number 4. If condition demo 4. And then hover over the class name and rename the class name. What I want to do in this example is I want to convert the switch case into an equivalent if condition. So after I accept an input from the user, I write my if condition that if code is equals to 1 or code is equals to 2 or code is equals to 3. Now that's an equivalent if condition to all this code. Okay. Then I want to display this. Else if the code is 4 or code is 5 or code is 6, then I want to display this. And in the final case, I'm going to display this. Okay. So this is basically equivalent to that switch case that you wrote below. Now you'll be like, I don't want to delete this switch case. I want to use it as, I want to keep it for my reference, but I do not want this to run. But I do not want to sit on each one of the lines and start writing comments. So here is the solution to your problem. You select the code that you want to comment, and you click the source menu and click on toggle comment, or the keyboard shortcut is control number 7. And all these lines are commented out. If you ever want to uncomment, just select them and hit control number 7. Uncomment, control number 7 comments. Or if you want to create a code block, a comment block, you can go to source menu and say, okay, I want to add a block comment. So it just creates a block comment, but it's not readable, right? But because it tries to condense the code as much as it can when it creates a block comment. So, you know, so that's why in some cases, I just prefer the toggle comment versus block. And go ahead and run it. And you will get the exact same output as before. No difference. But this was only to show you how you can use an OR operator in an if condition. And again, give me a green check when you are done.
How did you comment out all those lines of code at the same time?
Select all those lines of code. And then in the source menu, click on toggle comment, or you could use a keyboard shortcut control number 7.
Okay, perfect.
So we are waiting for Lewis. Lewis, is everything okay? Okay, you got it. Okay, now let's create a new class called, oop, I went in the wrong package, sorry. This one. Create a new class called if condition demo 5 with a public static void main. So we want to work with, what happened here? Oh, so it probably should be, oh, it's already exists number 5. Let me delete that and recreate number 5. Okay. I want to test the AND operator. So write a program to accept a range of number between the following classes and then display appropriate rent allowance. One through 5, rent allowance 2,800. So for range, I will use the AND operation. So if the value of code is greater than equals to 1, and at the same time it is less than equals to 5, so that means that if condition will work for all the values 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, because all 5 of those values are greater than or equals to 1, and at the same time are less than or equals to 5. So it gives you a range whenever you use an AND operator. So in that case, the rent allowance is $2,800. Else, if it is between 6 and 15, and this helps you, if the numbers are in sequence, like for example, in my previous example with OR, I wrote 4 or 5 or 6, I could have used an AND operator here as well, and I could have said greater than equals to 4 and less than equals to 6. That would have also worked just fine, but I wanted to teach you switch equivalent if condition. That's why I didn't do it. So I'm just doing this example. Okay, so now since this is a more wider range, instead of me sitting there and say code 6, code 7, code 8, code 9, code 10, all the way through code 15, this is a much better approach. So this allowance is 2,000. Okay. For code greater than equals to 16 all the way through 21, it is 1,200. And for all other cases, it's $0. So we run the program. We ask for an input of job classification code. If the person says, let's say 16, it displays 1200. That's the range the person falls under. Yeah, let me know when you guys are done. Smile is the only one missing. Okay. Well, since we have multiple conditions other than if and else, they're all connected with else if. So if the first condition is false, then line 17 will run. If line 17 is false, then line 20 will run. If line 20 is false, line 23 will run. And else is inclusive of all values other than 1 through 21. So if you replace the else ifs on line 17 and 20 with independent ifs, then you are risking yourself having to run all 3 if conditions for no reason. The purpose of writing else if is that as soon as one of the 3 conditions is true, any condition after that will not even run. But replacing it with 3 independent ifs, you're forcing all 3 to run. Even though you will still get the same output, but it's a waste of the the CPU's time.
Yeah, it costs you a bit.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. So now let's move on to our next example here, new class. And this time we will demo a conditional operator. Enter number of guests. Now I'm writing an if condition to display an output that if the number of guests is equals to 1, then I want to display one guest is coming, okay? And if it is more than 1, then I'll be like, okay, more like X number of guests are coming. So you see the difference between here, between the 2 instructions here. And then I can also use a nested if in this example, but let's first start like this here for now, okay? So when I run this example, enter number of guests, and I say, okay, 5, it'll say, okay, 5 guests are coming. And when I say 1, it'll say 1 guest is coming. So it can do all of that easy stuff. However, with the presence of conditional operator, you can eliminate all this in 1 line. Whatever's going on in 4 lines, you can just do it all in 1 line. And that's what we'll be looking at next, how you can do this in 1 line. So I will let everybody finish this. I will clear the feedback so that you can give me a green check when you are done testing this code. So that when I'm doing the other piece, you have already tested this one. Okay, so Jack still coding. And Tatiana is still coding. Okay. Oh, Tatiana is still coding. All done. Okay. So now I will make some changes here to this one. First of all, let me put this in a nested if. Okay. So I want to make sure that if the number of guests are greater than equals to 1, okay, that's basically the first condition in which I will be putting all of these conditions in. Otherwise, I'll just say that you have an invalid number of guests. So the number of guests has to be greater than equals to 1. Now I want to tell you one thing over here is how you can format this. Notice this if else is not properly formatted. So I could use in Eclipse a shortcut called Control-Shift-F. It's a keyboard shortcut, Control-Shift-F, and it auto formats my code. You see that? How the if else was before, it was in the same line. When I do Control-Shift-F, observe, watch, and see, everything got nicely formatted. So it's a great help for your homework because I've noticed that some of the people just turn in their homework, which is not well formatted. So it makes reading code difficult. Anyway, so now that you have this nested if, so now when I run this and if I enter like number of guests -9, it just yells back and says invalid number of guests. Okay. So let me clear the feedback again for you to give me a new feedback before I introduce the conditional operator. Okay. So now I would like you guys to select these 4 lines and comment them. I'm using Control-7. And now write a single line, system.out.println. This line will serve the purpose of all 4 of these lines. Okay. We will use a conditional operator in Java, which looks like this. It has a condition followed by a question mark. If the condition is true, you take one plan of action. If the condition is false, you take the other plan of action. So that's basically how it looks like. This is the only ternary operator in Java because it works with 1, 2, and 3 values. That's why it's a ternary operator. So first of all, we put a condition over here. Okay, the condition is what is the number of guests? If the number of guests equals to 1, then we will display one set of output. Otherwise, we will display the other set of output. So if the number of guests is 1, then we will say, okay, whatever number of guests are there, let's concatenate that, right? The number of guests, concatenate that by this phrase. Guest or guests, concatenate that by is coming. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say is. It should be guest is or guests are. So this is the variable guests. This will decide if I should display guest is or I should display guests are, depending on the condition, if guests is equals to 1 or not. You probably might have seen this in C#, right? No? Or yes? Don't remember? Okay. But just so that you know, for your knowledge, it is used exactly the same way in C#. It may look a bit confusing when you look at syntactically, but the more you get familiar with it, you get used to. I mean, like anytime you realize, oh, it's just a slight variation in an if condition, and it's equality operator or any other operator, it doesn't matter. But if it's a slight variation and it's for output purpose, I mean, it's a judgment call. How about if I use a conditional operator versus having to use an entire if-else block? So let me clear the feedback again for you guys to give me new feedback. Okay, so how about we now take a break over here till 8 o'clock. And then when we come back at 8 o'clock, we will then start with chapter number 6, which is loops. Okay, guys, welcome back. So as I was telling you before we went on break, that we will be working with loops, which is chapter number 6. Just like in C#, you have loops. You have exactly the same stuff in Java. You have loops, you have precondition loop, post-condition loop, you have for loop, you have nested loops. All of the idea is exactly the same. Okay. So, why do we have loops? Let's start. Why do we have loops?
In case you need to do the same thing multiple times.
Exactly. In case you want to do something over and over again. So loops can be finite or infinite. So that's why we would say we want to do something over and over again until certain condition is met or certain count is met. However, at the same time, I want to tell you that not in all cases, infinite loops are bad. Infinite loops can also be good. Can you think of an example where infinite loop can be good? Look at the bottom right corner of your desktop. What do you see?
The date.
And time. So time is constantly running in an infinite loop. Otherwise, if you turn off your computer, the time will stop. So somewhere the time is ticking. So it just comes back up when you turn on the computer. So that information is passed over from your ROM into your CPU, like from your ROM into your Windows. Anyway, so infinite process, as long as your computer is on, at least on the screen, it just constantly keeps running. It's an infinite loop. So infinite loops are not always bad, but we're not going to be coding one in this course. But in advanced Java, you will see some infinite code, especially when we are doing Java network programming, where we will be building the client and server applications. And server will constantly be waiting for client to communicate with server. So that constant wait can only be coded with an infinite loop. Okay. Anyway. Going to our loops in Java. So we will start out with our very first class in which we will demo the while loop. And the reason I'm sort of kind of not explaining things a lot, especially the stuff that you already know, is because you already know it. As soon as you look at the code, you'll probably hit the refresh button and you'll be like, oh, it's exactly the same thing. So if I were to run a while loop to display numbers 1 through 10. So all loops need a starting point. So in this case, my starting point is 1. What is my ending point? My ending point is 10. And my increment is by 1. Well, what am I doing? I'm just displaying the number. That's all I'm doing. It's just a simple loop. You probably would have done something like this in C#. So that's one way a loop can be used. So what kind of loop is the while loop? While loop is a precondition loop, means it checks a condition right at the beginning of the entry into the loop body. So if the condition is false, it will just terminate right away. Does this syntax reminds you of stuff that you had done in C sharp?
Yep.
So in this example, if I were to display the numbers 10 through 1 instead of 1 through 10, what changes will I make to this example to display numbers 10 through 1?
Start by initializing I to 10.
Okay. Then next thing.
Then while I is greater than or equal to 1,
Uh-huh. That's okay. And what else?
and then instead of incrementing I, just decrement it.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep. If I want to display only the odd numbers from 1 through 10, what change will I make to this code? I want to only display the odd numbers. What change will I make to this code?
You can make it add by 2.
What will be the instruction? Give me the full instruction.
I plus equals 2.
I plus equals 2. So I plus plus will be changed to I plus equals to 2. Okay. Now, having that this is my starting point, I want to display all even numbers between 1 and 10. So what changes will I make?
First initialized I to 2.
Uh-huh. And then the second change will be exactly the same as before, I plus equals to 2. Cool. Awesome. Now let's save this example as demo while loop, or I should say demo do while loop 1, do while loop. Do while loop and while. The only difference is that it's post condition and the condition is towards the end. So with do while loop, it is a post condition. Okay. And if I run it, I get to see the exact same output as before. Okay. Which of the two loops is more efficient, while loop or do while?
Is it the while?
No, it's do while. Why? Let me explain it to you. While is a precondition loop, right? So let's go to the while loop example, and let's say how many times this loop will actually run. First time I comes in, what is the value of I? 1. So it checks 1 is a good value, goes ahead. I becomes 2, comes back and checks 2, then checks 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7, then 8, then 9, then 10, and terminates when I becomes 11. Okay, so I actually went through, I'm like 11 checks. 10 good checks and 1 termination check, right? Now let's come to the do while loop example. The do while, what's the first check for do while?
It's gonna,
It's gonna be what?
it's just gonna print out,
No,
one.
what will be the value of I on the first check?
1.
No, it won't be 1.
It'll be 2.
It'll be 2. Because see, I was 1, you printed the 1. Now, what does that make I? 2, right? So the first time you actually check the I is 2. Then you check 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7, then 8, then 9, then 10, then 11. So how many checks did you made?
Less than the while loop.
Exactly. You made 1 less check than the while loop. Because you never checked for the first condition. So that's why do while loop is a little bit more efficient than while loop, because it makes 1 less check. Okay, now let's transform that into a for loop. So demo for loop 1. Okay. So if I were to change everything for for loop is much simpler. For loop is also it's a precondition loop. It checks the condition before you enter the body of the loop. So we got to use the for loop to display numbers 1 through 10. So for for loop, you can just put it all together in one place. For I equals to 1, I should be less than equals to 10. And I plus plus, everything could be in one place. You don't need any of that stuff, right? Okay. And since you only have 1 line to display, even curly braces are not required. So in this kind of situation, for loop turns out to be the best choice, because you can see what you were doing with like 6 lines, you are now doing in 2 lines. So when I run this, it does exactly the same thing. Okay. However, for loop has a lot of variations. And that's what we want to look at, some of the variations of for loop, for which I will be saving this example as demo for loop 2 and then demo for loop 3. So that we can be looking at different variations. So if you're done with this one, give me a green check so I know that when everybody's done, I'll move on to the second variation. So for the second variation, let's save this as demo for loop number 2. And we will rename, and then if the variable I is already declared before you enter the loop for whatever reason, you can just simply delete that portion, but leave the semicolon only there. And go ahead and run your program. Will work exactly the same way as before. Okay. Now, let's save this one as number 3. Hover over to change the name. And if you had increment somewhere in the body of the loop, then you can simply remove that from here as well. So it just has a condition. That's all it does. Starting point is moved out, increment is moved in the body. So that's another variation. Run it, you get the same output. Now we will look at the 4th variation. So demo for loop number 4. In the 4th variation, you can actually increment inside the output. So what basically is happening here, since it's a post increment, so it first displays the value and then it increments. Okay. So if I run it, it'll do exactly the same thing. Now let me look at the 5th variation of for loop. In the 5th variation of for loop, it is possible for you to work with multiple variables. So I can have multiple assignments. Similarly, I can have that I plus j should be, oops, what's going on? I plus j should be less than equals to 100. And then I have I plus plus and I have j plus plus, just like that. I, comma, j. So as you can see, that how the values are moving till the sum reaches 100. And you can clearly see in the next cycle, I will be 50 and j will be 51. So of course you will clearly bypass 100, so stop. If you want, you can also display that information along with it. And here you go. Again, give me a thumbs, give me a green check, sorry, when you're done. So have you guys seen something like this before in C#?
Vaguely, yes.
But just so that you know, you can do something like this in C# as well. This is not just limited to Java. Okay. We still have like 3 people coding. Okay, so we have Smile still coding, Jonathan and Lewis. Okay. Oh, okay. Jonathan, you're still coding, right? Or you're done?
Yeah,
Oh.
I'm trying to figure out where, because apparently I have an error.
Which line, 7 or 8?
8. I
Eight.
mean the for loop. I think.
The line of the for loop. Okay, this
I mean,
line.
I can like show you mine if
Yeah.
you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, you never declared. So get rid of line 8, delete line 8 altogether. Okay, put int before the I.
Okay.
Okay, so you're basically declaring I and J on the same line.
Oh, my bad. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Okay. Now what I want you to do is I want you to save this as number 6. And then change your name of the file and then delete this I++ J++ from the loop condition and rather put it right in the output. It's gonna look a little crazy, right? You have so many pluses running next to each other. But notice one difference here. Because this is post increment, by the time you do I plus J, the values are not matching, right? So it says 1, 2, and 5. It should say 3. But the problem is when you are doing the addition, I is not 1 anymore. I has already become 2 and J has already become 3. So it is actually 5. That's basically the drawback of this approach in this methodology because of the increment happening before the addition. So we will undo the change. I wanted to do something else here. I just wanted to show you why I did not do I++ and J++ in the output instruction. Okay. Have we worked with the printf function before? Printf.
I don't think we did.
Okay, let's do that. Printf is usually used in Java for column formats. So instead of system.out.println, we use printf. This is how printf works. First of all, you create in double quotes your whole structure of the sentence, your column formats, and then outside of the double quotes, you start listing the values. For example, for the I, let's say I need 4 digits of integer type. And I need for J another 4 digits of integer type. Then I need an equals to. So for equals to, I will just use %2s. It's a column of 2 letters. And then I need the output, which is an addition of %, let's say 6d. So these are my columns. 4 characters, 4 characters, 2 characters, 6 characters. And now I can start listing that in the first one, I want to display I as a column name. The second one display J as the column name. Then I want to have equals to, and then I want to have my sum. Okay, total, just like that. And then since printf doesn't automatically does a new line, so this combination will have a slash n in the end for the new line. Okay, slash n, just like that. Okay. Now let me run this. Okay, oops, hold on a second. Oh, %6s. Okay, what's going on? 4D. Oh, my bad. It should be S, not D, because I and J are string on this level. My bad. So this should all be string for now. Yeah, here we go. Okay, look at the column heading. I is 4 characters long, J is 4 characters long, equals to is 2 characters long, and sum is the 6 characters long. So I'll take the same format and I'll push it under the loop, except for wherever I have I and J and sum, I will use the D, and the D, and I'll drop the double quotes. Sum will be I plus J. So now when I run this example, look at how the outputs are coming in respective columns. This is the I column, that's a J column, and that's a sum column. So did you guys follow this example, what we did here in this example? Any questions anybody has? Okay. So next I would want to move to a nested loop. So let's create a new class called the nested loop demo with a public static void main. A nested loop is a loop within a loop. This is how I want you to understand nested loops. I always use this as an example. There's an outer loop and then there's an inner loop. The outer loop is more or less like an hour hand on your clock. and your inner loop is more like a minute hand. In order for your hour to be displaced by 1, the minute hand has to complete all its cycles. Exactly the same way, the inner loop has to complete all its cycles for you to transition to the next number in the outer loop. And then you enter the inner loop again, and it starts again from 0, just like the minute hand starts again from 1 as soon as the next hour gets struck. So for each hour, the minute hand starts from the beginning exactly the same way. For each occurrence of the outer loop, the inner loop starts from the beginning. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's how the working of the loops are. Now let's say I want to print 5 lines of asterisks and each line will have 10 asterisks. Okay. So how will I do this? Of course, I know that this will be done with the nested loop because I see 2 distinct variations, right? One is a number that goes from 1 through 5, and the other one is a number that goes from 1 through 10. But which one of the 2 will I keep in my outer loop, and which one of the 2 I'm going to keep in my inner loop? I need 5 lines with each line having 10 asterisks.
The 5 line will be the outer loop.
Outer loop, right? Because the lines are controlled by the outer loop, and the individual items within a line are controlled by the inner loop. So I'll have 4 integer line equals to 1, and line should be less than equals to 5, and I got a line plus plus. And then for my outer loop, I got for item equals to 1, item has to be less than equals to 10, and item plus plus. And what I'm doing here is on the same line, I got to print asterisks. But the problem is, how will I go to the next line? The only way to do that would be to include this in a group, because now I have multiple instructions. And as soon as I'm done with the inner loop and I'm about to go back to the outer loop, I must create a blank line. Create a new line before returning back to the outer loop. So let's run this. Okay, so here we go. Let me clear the feedback for you to give me a new feedback when you're done with this one. Okay, so Aiden and Jack, two people are left. Oh, okay, only one person, Jack, is left. Everybody got it. Okay. Now, can you save this example as nested loop demo number 2? And I want to print 5 lines of asterisks. Okay. Or rather, I want to have a 5 lines. I would have 5 lines of right angle triangle of asterisks. Aha. Five lines. Or I should say, I would like to have a right angle triangle of 5 lines of asterisks. You guys know what a right angle triangle, right? So what change will I make to my code to make this code behave like a right triangle? And it is so simple that you don't have to add a single new instruction. Just modify one instruction and you can have a right triangle. Just one instruction you have to modify, that's about it.
Item is less than or equal to line.
Exactly. Item is less than equal to line. Because what we want to do is on the first line, we want to print 1 asterisk, which is the value of line. On the second time the inner loop runs, we want to print 2 asterisks, which will be the value of line in the second run. So each run of the outer loop, it will define how many stars to print on the line. And here we go. Okay. Okay, next we will work with an event control loop. So far, all the loops that we have worked with were time control loop, count control loop, because we knew the ending count of the loop. The event control loop is when you know the ending condition, but you do not know when that ending condition will occur. For example, keep accepting an input from user till the user enters a valid value. Now, the valid value could be entered the first time, could never be entered. So as long as the condition is not fulfilled, the loop will just keep going. So that's what basically a condition, like event control loop is. Okay, so let's create a new class. We're going to call this one event controlled loop demo. Now, write a program to accept a number between 0 and 100. Okay. Typically, you are used to of telling the user to do that for you, and you trust the user. You're like, okay, enter a number between 0 through 100, and you are trusting the user that the user will enter a number within that range. And then like, okay, integer, the score equals to new scanner system dot in dot next. Okay. And you're pretty much trusting the user will enter a number between 0 and 100. If the user doesn't do that, you'll be like, okay, if the score is greater than 100 or the score is less than 0, then you are simply notifying the user incorrect input. But you're not really giving the user a choice of re-entering the input. So if I enter -9, that's all you say, incorrect input. So the whole idea of an event control loop is to give the user the next choice, another choice to be able to enter the value again. Okay, so that's basically the whole thing. So we will look at this problem in multiple phases. So I'm drafting the first solution for this. Okay, so we accept an input from the user while score, and now this is where I can use this condition in my while loop. Okay, while score is greater than 100 or score is less than 0, as long as, you know, this is the case, then tell the user to re-enter the number and take the input again. Oops. And I'll delete this if condition. I don't really need that if condition. Okay. So now let's test this. So if I enter -9, it just asks me to re-enter. If I enter -100, like if I enter 150, it asks me to re-enter. If I enter 50, then it stops asking me. So I wrote a little piece of code where after I accept my input, I'm checking to make sure that my input is valid. If my input is valid, the line number 10 will just simply kick me out to line 14. If my input is invalid, I will be stuck lines 10 through 13 until and unless I enter a value that will make that condition false. Again, you guys might have done something like this in C#. It's just a review for you guys of creating the event control loops. Please give me a green check when you have accomplished this. And as I told you that this is only the first version of the code, we will be improving this version. I believe Jonah is the only one left. Everything okay, Jonah? Yeah, getting any errors? Oh, okay. Did you use and instead of an or maybe on line 10? Okay. Or might have used a different operator, like it is greater than 100, you might have used less than 100 or greater than 0, so that's probably might be stuck there.
Yeah, I finished.
Okay, cool. Now I would like you guys to pay attention to this particular approach, and you will see some redundancy here that we are using enter, and then we are repeating the same logic again. How can we maybe make it a little bit better? By maybe reducing the code complexity. How about if we use, instead of a while loop, if we use a do while loop? In the do while loop, we can accept an input from the user. Okay, this is only the first round of it, right? So I'm gonna just comment out this, and I'll just set the integer score to 0. So I will enter the loop. I will accept a number from the user. If the number is up to par, line 13 will be false and the loop terminates. If the number is not up to par, line number 13 will force me to go back to line number 11 through line number 10. So let's try this. Okay. So I'm entering, let's say, -9, enter 105, I enter 55 stops. Okay. However, the only drawback to this process is that I do not get re-enter when I come in the second time. Right? How can I fix that?
Add an if statement.
If statement. Well, how about if we can use like conditional operator maybe? Well, I'm gonna shorten my logic a little bit more. You remember the conditional operator, the question mark colon guy? So what I can use is some kind of a variable that I can increment. For example, if I have I equals to 0. And if I'm going through it the first time, I want I will be to change to a 1. So as long as I can basically make this choice, as long as I is equals to 0, I want to display the enter. Otherwise, I want to display the word re-enter, and then concatenate that with the rest of the string. So when I run this example now, oh, I should probably should put this in one and then concatenate that. Okay, enter a number. So if I enter negative, now it says re-enter, 105, re-enter, stops. Okay. So this whole block is making the decision for me. Can I do the same if I use the value of score? Because if score is 0, I will never come back here. So if I say if score is 0, that means that you are here for the first time. Because if score is 0 entered by the user on the next line, you will never revisit this line. So let's try that. Okay, enter a number. If I enter negative 96. Okay, so pretty much I can eliminate this guy. Not needed. So here I was able to code my enter, re-enter logic. So this was an event control loop. Okay, everybody get to see that? Let me clear out the feedback and you can give me a new feedback. And also wanted to ask another follow-up question. Does it all make sense to you guys what I'm doing here? Or is it like too complicated stuff?
I don't really understand how when you put a negative number in, it brings you back to line 11.
Okay, here it is. If I enter a value negative 10, is negative 10 greater than 100? No. So that's a false, right? But on the other side of OR, is negative 10 less than 0?
Yes.
Yes. So how does an OR work? So it has a false or true. And OR requires only one of the two conditions to be true. And as long as the loop's condition is true, the loop continues. So since one of the two conditions is true, this will actually loop back to do, which will then run this line. So if I enter, let's say 101, now for 101, this is true, this is false, but since one of them is true, it will again loop back. But if I enter a value 59, now 59 is neither greater than 100, nor it is less than 0. So now the loop terminates.
And then because the value of score never changes, when it brings you back to line 11, it'll always say re-enter.
Yeah, because the value of score would only be 0 the first time. So if I enter 0, when I'm coming in, it is 0, right? If I say 0, now 0 is a valid value according to this condition, because 0 is neither greater than 100, nor it is less than 0. So 0 is a valid value, so it will just terminate after that. So I will never come back into the loop with score being 0 again.
Why don't we implement 0? Like, how does the value of score change?
Line number 12. We are accepting the value from user. this is where the value of score changes from 0 to a different value. So the first value of score is 0. So that when we enter the loop the first time, we make a choice. If score is 0, that means you're here for the first time. So display the word enter along with the message a number from 0 through 100. So that's what you get to see here. If somebody enters negative 96, okay, what is score now? Negative 96. Because on the next line, we change the value of score from 0 to negative 96. And negative 96 is not greater than 100, but it is less than 0. So with or, this condition becomes true. So you basically go back in the loop. Then this time, since score is not 0 anymore, it is negative 96. Therefore, this time the word re-enter will be printed. Re-enter a number. Now, if I enter 100, so 100 is not greater than 100. 100 is not less than 0. So the loop will terminate.
Okay, I see. I just didn't understand how the value of score was being changed, but I see that it's getting assigned to the input. So
Yeah, on line number 12, correct. Yeah.
okay.
Okay, now let's create our next class. We're going to call this next class customer. And we'll be with a public static void main. Okay. And we'll try to use our if condition and loops in this next example that we are doing here. So we will create an example where a customer will have a few fields like private integer ID is one of the fields for the customer, and private double salary is another field. Real quick, I will be creating a constructor of customer type. And again, this is something we did last week, so I'm going to be going rather quickly with this one. And I'll create an overloaded constructor, which will take 2 parameters. I'm going to use a this call. So all of this stuff, I want you to remember, I hope you remember from last week. So this is my default constructor, and this is my overloaded constructor. And I'm passing the values of 101 into ID and the salary into salary, which will then be assigned to the object. Then I'll write the getter and the setters for the object. Public void get ID. It will return this dot ID. Oh, sorry, not void. It should be int. Public double get salary, and that will return this dot salary. Similarly, I'll have setters. So these are the getters and the setters I wrote. Okay. So Ismail, this is what I was talking about earlier today. About slow typing. So here we have two constructors for each property. We have getters and setters. Right now, I have not incorporated any if conditions. I've not incorporated any loops, nothing. But we will do that. Okay. Now let's come down to the main method and we want to instantiate an object of customer type. So customer cust1 equals to new customer. So we create an object of customer type. We are calling the default constructor, which will, then assign it whatever it wants to assign it. Now it's basically the process of accepting a value for setting the customer's ID after the default value. So that's where I can be using my loop, my event control loop. So accept customer ID from user, and customer ID has to be between 100 and 999. Okay, the customer ID has to be between 100 and 999 inclusive. So 100 and 999 are inclusive in the range. I could bring that code that I just wrote in event control loop. I could just literally bring this code as it is and paste it right here, just like that, and make some minor changes, such as instead of int score, I'm going to just call it int ID. And if it is 0, enter, otherwise re-enter, right? So I'm going to just call it ID, everybody, everywhere there's a score. I'll just gonna, leave it at that value. Okay. Now, if ID is less than 100, or I can say if ID is greater than 999, or ID is less than 100, I want the user to re-enter. Okay. I don't know why my mouse does that sometimes. And then I can pretty much make sure that if when the ID comes out of the range, it is one of those values. And you know what? I can start out with 100 here because that's the lowest acceptable value as my starting value. Okay. So now I can, after I come out of it, I can say cust1 dot set ID, and then I can pass the ID, because now I know for sure that ID is a valid value. So if I run this program and I were to, oh, I should change this too. It should be between 100 and 999. Okay, so enter a value. Let's see if I enter 56, it just asks me to re-enter a value. If I enter, let's say 1000, enter re-enter. If I enter 850, then it just takes it as a valid value. So it's the same logic that I just deployed here, which I wrote earlier on, just made some minor changes to it. And I'll now be displaying my output here. Customer ID is cust1.getID. And customer salary is customer dot get salary. Okay, everybody got this so far? Run it. Did you ran it to make sure that it works? Okay, guys, now let's get to calling through the cust one, the set salary. And let's set it to a certain amount, like 850,000, for example. Okay. So now in the if condition, in the set salary, I want to have an if condition that if the salary coming through is greater than equals to, let's say, 25,000, and salary is less than equals to 500,000, only then assign the salary its value, which is coming through. Else if salary is less than 25,000, then the salary should actually be assigned a value of 25,000. Otherwise, if probably the only other possibility would be that it's greater than 500,000, in that case, the salary will be fixed at 500,000. Okay. So me entering a salary of 850,000 should come back as 500,000. So 850,000 is an invalid amount per the rulings. So that's why it will be reset like that. Okay, everybody get to try this? Tested it. Works. Any questions? So if you're done coding this and you have tested it, it runs fine for you. And if you don't have any questions, then I want you to visit this week's unit and look at this week's homework problem or homework problems. And let me know if you have any question about any of the homework problems for this week. They'll be under unit 4. And also right above the assignment is a quiz. I forgot to turn it on, so I just turned it on. So you may have to refresh it for you to be able to see that there's a chapter 4 quiz, and then there's an assignment number 4. I'll clear your feedbacks for you to, if you have any questions. Okay, no questions? Then that's all for tonight.
You good? Awesome. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yep.
Have a good night.
Good
Have a
night,
good night.
everybody. Take care.
Yeah, have a good week.